Today we are joined by Miss Ellen Taaffe. I hope I said that correctly. We just talked about it, so okay. And Ellen, you good? Okay, good. And Ellen, we sometimes like to have our guests introduce themselves. So for somebody who's never heard of you, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. My name is Ellen Taaffe. You got it right. I'm a clinical associate professor at the Kellogg School of Management, where I teach leadership to MBA students and run the Women's Leadership Program. And I also serve on 3 boards, and I've recently written a book called The Mirror Door: Breakthrough the Hidden Barrier That Locks Successful Women in Place. And I do all this after a 25-year corporate career, 5 years running a boutique consulting firm, and I've now been back at Kellogg for 7 years.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you for this conversation. And of course, the first question is, what is the mirror door?
Sure. The first question I always get. So the mirror door is my metaphor for this dynamic that many women face, where when we face opportunity and reflect inward and think we're not ready or worthy to move into action. And so frequently it is a distorted view and we're much more ready than we realize. But we tend to fall back on, other actions that that have helped us before, but don't necessarily put us into the action that's really needed to grow and learn and move forward with our careers.
So the first question was, we talked about the mirror door, and then the second question that I have for you is, when do we meet? Like, when do we come across the mirror door? Does it happen early in women's careers, or does it happen a little bit later? Or are there multiple mirror doors that women can face?
Yeah, great question. I think that it can happen throughout our career. It particularly occurs when we're stretching into something new, and I think it happens when we face obstacles or pushback as well. But I have one chapter in the book called The Mirrored Maze, which is the idea that a lot of things in the workplace can almost create this metaphorical idea of a mirrored door, that make us take it on ourselves and reflect inward. And many times there's an external obstacle or bias or something like that. And many times we also are getting in our own way.
That's a great answer. And is this something that men can come across too? Is this something that men can deal with in the workplace?
I think so. I mean, I wrote this book, or when I saw this happening to my students, where they're in an opportunity and they're holding back, even raising their hands, I would say the research supports this is happening more to women, for example, seeing an opportunity and not going for a promotion or a new job because they don't have 10 of 10 skills, whereas men are moving forward when the research shows they move forward with like 6 of the 10 skills that are on a job posting. Now, that said, I do think men face their own self-doubt or their own things. I just think it's less frequent and less intense for men, and there's many more ties to women growing up, as girls, feeling like we have to be more perfect, we have to be more other oriented, and some of the things that I think contribute to the mirror door. What's interesting, I'm learning a lot. The book came out 1 month ago from the day we're recording this. And I was just on a call earlier today where a couple men who've read the book said, I relate to a lot of this too. So I am learning that that there's sort of different messages that they got. In a man up culture, that's a hard thing if you don't fit with that as well. So yes and yes, I guess.
I have one comment and then one question, but my comment on that is I think men may come across it more if they were in situations where they might have like either they're a person of color or they maybe didn't have a lot of money, because I feel like that can kind of lead to imposter syndrome. And even though this isn't necessarily imposter syndrome, just more kind of like barriers, I feel like sometimes you can feel like you're not in the men's club, even if you are a man, because you didn't come from like a background that was wealthy or had the connections or anything like that.
Yeah,
Um,
fair point.
so one of the so the question that I had for you is when it comes to the mirror door, we're talking about women and we're talking about people. You mentioned in your book, I believe there was like one note about hosting women's welcome events to increase belonging, which I love. And I've always tried to attend those in a professional setting just because it feels like, oh, I can relate to this woman. But do you ever feel a sense of competitiveness, either in those events or even in the classroom with the students that you teach or coach? And then do you have like any, yeah, just like your comments on like any competitiveness and then maybe where that might stem from and how to move forward if you're coming across those barriers?
Yeah, so you asked a few good things in there, and I think I do the women's welcome events after being at an orientation, the very first meeting of MBA students, and seeing a female CEO share her story and open it up for questions, and none of the women raised their hands, and they're so smart. They've accomplished a lot in their 20s, so like something was up with that. So then, in the future years of orientation, we do a women's welcome event, and in it we also do some other networking exercises to get people to, I share that story also about women not raising their hands, and this is like the perfect place to take a risk and to put yourself out there, and it's a part of learning. But we also do some networking, where we're sort of um, encouraging them to meet other people in the room that don't look like them, and we sort of put them through some exercises, and they learn afterwards the value of being with people who aren't like you, even though human nature is to connect with people who are like you. But part of the great experience, at our school is the diversity of students, and that's like it shows in women's careers and networks that when they have more diverse experiences and people they can reach out to with different perspectives, they're going to be that much better. Um, to your other question about competition, I don't see that in the classroom. Now the class that I teach is a small group classroom. It's a personal leadership insights is the name of the course. It's about learning who you are, strengths, values, needs. You get feedback. It's a real bonding experience. Where I do see the challenge, and I don't call it competition, I call it comparison. And it's because for a lot of MBA students, they are coming back to get a different job. I mean, I'd like to say they're here for the learning, but they've taken, especially in the full-time program, they've taken time away from working, maybe taken out big loans, and so they're really counting on that job that they'll get. And so as the recruiting season goes along, I hear the comments of this person, got all the interviews in the consulting firms. This person didn't, or that's where I feel like there is a comparison of, am I being as successful as the other people that I perceive? And some of it is just the makeup of going after these new jobs. It's just very difficult to sort of keep the faith if you do not get to the next stage of what you hoped for. But it's also understanding that everybody has a story, and on the outside they might all look like they've got it going on, and everything looks perfect. But in reality, in some ways, just like on Instagram or something like there's curated images out there. Um, we do a lot to try to make sure that women, because I work with the Women's Business Association, there's all kinds of ways to get involved and to work together on teams. So I think it really builds a healthy, strong relationship, women to women as well. So I don't know. Ask me more on competition, or if that doesn't answer
No,
what
that
you were
was good.
looking for.
That was a perfectly good question. It's just more like personally, like when you mentioned comparison, I was like, oh yeah, like I get that. But personally, like I'm a competitive person. And so when it
Hmm.
comes to working, like even men or women,
Yeah.
like I just get competitive because I had to
Hmm.
work very hard to where I'm at. And
Yeah.
the minute I feel like threatened, like I'm going to be vulnerable, but now I'll say threatened, I'll start to get really like anxious, and then the comparison starts. Like what do they have in terms of skill sets or networking that I don't have? So I was just curious to see if that came across like what you see like at an executive MBA coaching level,
Yeah.
and how people deal with it.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things for our careers are to be able to give and gain from feedback, and it's really hard because many managers are not very good at giving feedback, and women get more vague. I mean, research shows women get more vague feedback and more subjective feedback. That it's really hard to know what to do with that. And so, one counter to that is to really work on coming up with powerful questions that can help you to learn more. So, if you are in a situation where you see somebody got promoted, how can you ask questions like, how did the promotion process work? How am I tracking relative to my goal of getting to that next
Mhm.
level? What would I need to do? Or when you get that kind of subjective, you need to be more confident, or you need to like some of the things that like, what do I do with that? So sometimes a counter is to say something like, and if I was more commanding in that product development meeting, what would that look like? How would you know I'm there? Because you're kind of helping a manager who's not articulating very well what they're looking for. And so often they kind of are in a I know it when I'll see it, which is really unhelpful for us. So I know I'm going off on my soapbox on this, but the getting good at asking questions that pull things out of people who aren't either comfortable or used to really being specific, so that they can say, something more specific and helpful for the areas that we do need to develop too.
That's a great answer. And I know, like, Victoria, how you kind of spoke to, how you kind of feel in the work environment. I kind of feel like I'm almost on the flip side where I definitely go through like bouts of, imposter syndrome and, feeling like, I'm not doing the right things, or, I'm also just a very non-confrontational person. So people with, strong personalities, I very easily feel intimidated, which is something I'm very actively working on. But I struggle with that on a day-to-day basis. And you touched on it in your last answer a little bit, but for women who are maybe just starting to enter the workforce and have never had to deal with managers or coworkers before, and don't know what to expect, what's the best mindset, I guess, that they can kind of go into the workforce with, so that they're expecting, know what to expect when it comes to the mirrored door, know how to kind of start combating that early on, because that's still something at, age 26, however many years, I've been in the workforce, that I'm still trying to work through. So I guess for younger women, how can they what mindset can they go in with?
I think the more that you can find people that you can trust, like, and hopefully that could be your manager, where you're trusting that they have your best interest, and you trust them that when they give you feedback there is something to it. So as a young person, the more you can share what you want in your career, and enlist your manager or maybe a mentor to help you get good feedback, to get advice, and to get the experiences that will help you get there. And when you can do that with trust and even vulnerability of I'm working on standing up to strong personalities, or I'm working on being defensive when I get feedback. Whatever that thing is, we're all working on something, and the more you can kind of say, I'm focused on that. I would love to, get your help in helping me to make progress and giving me some feedback on that too. Because I think what happens is, and many times for young women, I'm guessing you all did well academically. You've done well in the start of your career. But so often, I always point to that 70% of valedictorians are young women in our country, but like only 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs. So something happens along the way. But I think a lot of times we go from school where like all the rules are pretty clear. There's a rubric, you can put in your hard work and get the result. And then you get in the workplace and there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of unsaid rules, and you're sort of figuring out how does it work here. And so mentors that help you to see how does it work here, and finding those ways to know how are you doing, what do you need to develop. And my hope is that comes with a boss that really like champions you and helps you to see the areas that you just need to develop to build your competency. So uh, I don't know. That's my best guess for that. But I think sometimes the other thing I would say is if you are someone who has a harder time with the bigger personalities, or when someone comes at you with fight or strength or something like that, um, you know, tap into your own courage to say what is important to you, so that you're not neglecting your own needs in the equation between other people too.
Love that.
That's interesting, Emily, that you brought that up because my like issue is that I always try not to come off as too aggressive. Like I'm probably that stronger personality that Emily is like, okay, back off just for a second. And that kind of also like leads me to my next question, and maybe like it's kind of an out there question, but I have been accused of having resting bitch face, and I work like I think for the majority of my jobs that I've had, I've always worked in like male dominated like places, except for maybe one job, which was the job Emily and I were in. But the job I have right now, there's I think maybe four females at a 30-person company, and the rest are men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like I always feel like I have to like kind of like tiptoe between like being like aggressive and being like this is what I need because I'm a producer. I'm like this is what I need. This is the schedule. What is your schedule? Like I need to get back to this person. Like just very, and then also being like, hey, can you like let me know if you're available to do an interview on Monday? No rush, but I need to know by 3 p.m. And then in our meetings, I'm also scared that I have resting bitch face. So for or against resting bitch face, and maybe for women who are a little bit more aggressive, do you think we need to kind of like hide our aggression, or do you think we may need to um, develop other skills to kind of like mitigate that?
Yeah, so you both are touching on, I have these 5 strategies that help us to be successful, but also they can help, but they can hinder us too. And so what you're making me think of, Victoria, is this idea of having that strong personality that you're taking charge in a lot of ways. Um, you will likely face the bias that men and women are looking for other women to exhibit that warmth first. And so you're going through this trying to get the job done, but also like trying to play nice. And it's like all this extra energy that a lot of other people don't have to face. And the guys in your office probably don't have to deal with this like you do as well. So I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. So we need to get through it to, create the world that we want, is what I would say. One thing that I've seen has worked when this resonates is to create like an offset, in the sense of you're explaining your why or what's motivating you. Like, I want to make sure we have every detail covered in this production, or I'm not exactly sure what you do, but like, I want to like not miss a beat on everything that we have to get done. And our best way to do that is to get it done quickly, to check every single thing on that list and ensure we have it. And I'm gonna drive you crazy because I'm gonna double check a million times and ask you for this yesterday. But it's because I want us to show up so well. So you're sort of saying, you're offsetting what could be bias of like, who does she think she is? Um, or bossy, or the other B word that we don't want to be called. But by saying like, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's maybe partly your natural style, but it's also, it sounds like it's a fast paced job that you're in too. So it's a good fit with your style, but you might have some of that resistance. So offsetting that with really the, here's who I am, here's why I'm doing this. And I really appreciate, and let me know if it's too much on you, but like, I really appreciate you understanding like why I'm doing this too. So that's one thing that I would recommend. I don't know what to do about resting bitch face. There's no male counterpart to that. Like, there's not a male counterpart to a Karen. So these are just biased things. And I just would ask people in organizations to not use these terms. But, who knows? They're going to say them,
I was
and
gonna,
it's their
yeah,
problem. They're not all smiling either, but we're used to women smiling.
exactly. No, I don't think there is a male equivalent, and no one at the place I work now says it. I've had it
Yeah.
said at other places,
Yeah.
so I'm more aware of it now because it's been
I've
said in
heard
like
it too.
yeah before. But it was it. I don't think there is a male equivalent to like resting bitch face, but to me it might be like a guy that always wears sunglasses and you can't read his face. There's always like one guy that does that, and maybe because we work in media and production,
Hmm.
people are just more aware of their looks, so they like to wear sunglasses. But I'm always like, there's always that one dude that wears sunglasses, and they're just like, it's like, okay, well, I don't know.
So interesting.
That's true. Well, I've heard the joke on social media that I think like the Karen equivalent is like a Kevin. Is that what it is? I think that's what they've named it. Is like,
That.
Oh
I
no.
feel like, yeah. I mean, hey. But and you
I
kind
haven't
of,
heard
I'm going to start using that on the daily basis.
that.
But Ellen, I think you briefly touched on it a little bit in your last response about your 5 perils of success and how they're kind of like, it's a balancing act almost a little bit. So I know one of them is like eagerly pleasing people. And that's something I definitely struggle with, is I'm very much a people pleaser. So how is that something young women can work on in general? Because I feel like that's something that's kind of taught at a younger age, that it's, your demeanor and just to be a people pleaser and kind of quieter and introverted and things like that. So how do you kind of combat that when it comes to your professional and personal life? If there
Yeah.
is, a way that
Yeah.
you can kind of approach that problem.
Yeah. Well, first thing is to realize the strength of, so I call this strategy eagerly pleasing. And the strength is, these are people you want on the team. They're very aware of other people. They can read other people and therefore motivate them, but also be a bit of a peacemaker too, which, we need these skills in our workplaces and we need them on our team. So, this ability to anticipate others, prioritize others. The risk of it is when we don't prioritize ourselves. Now, I would say on eagerly pleasing, I don't see necessarily it being introverted or extroverted. I see people sort of regardless of however they take in or get their energy or not. But some people feel more, this resonates more. I would tell you this was me, or I have through my career at different times felt this too. And the risk is when we neglect our own needs, or there's something that we want to say and don't say it. And what can happen is you can feel like, well, what about me? And that can be like underneath it all. It can be frustrating or feel like even anger about like, don't other people see what I need too? And the risk career wise is that we can be seen as too soft, not being able to make the tough decisions, in particular, tough decisions that are around people-oriented issues, or raising conflicts because we're concerned about what other people. We don't want to disappoint other people too. So I'm seeing your nods here, and I think it's a transition of prioritizing, like thinking of us on a seesaw, and are we always at the bottom, or does it kind of go back and forth, so that like how do we sort of elevate our own needs and our own self in the equation with other people, and valuing respect over being liked. That from a career perspective, we want to like our leaders, but most of all we want to respect them. So this generally is somebody who does care a lot about other people, and that's kind of the secret, to tap into our care, to also use our courage to say what needs to be said, to raise the issues. And as I coach women or men who feel this, they generally have some of the strongest relationships that can withstand disagreement or conflict or saying no, and thinking no is a complete sentence. So, like in the book, one of the things that I recommend is building the muscle of boundary setting, so that you get kind of a practiced, comfortable way to clarify what boundary you're setting, to still connect with the person. So I have like clarify, connect, and collaborate. Whereas what happens so frequently is we want to say, I can't commit to that thing next week, and then we list all the reasons why, instead of I can't commit to that thing next week, but here's who I can recommend. Or if you take this off my plate, then I could do it. So it's a bit of a negotiation, but you're using your empathy that you likely have in this thing to be able to care about other people, but think about like I'm caring about not only my own needs, but like I care about the team, or I care about someone who reports to me. I care enough about their career that I'm going to be straight with them on the feedback of what I'm seeing. So it's leveraging the strengths of this to be able to practice in small ways, to set boundaries, to trust and give it a try on relationships that you can create. You can, raise conflicts. So finding those small stakes situations where you can do that, so that you can take care of yourself in these situations too, because you're spending a lot of time probably taking care of other people. So I don't know if it helps you.
That was perfect.
Yeah, because you're right. Setting boundaries is a muscle. Like you have to be comfortable with it and doing that. I only have one more question, Emily. I don't know if you have any other questions. My last question, I'm very curious about like what you do and like when people go back to school for management. So you mentioned earlier in the podcast that like people may be coming in for a career change or a little bit later than like right after they graduate, like undergraduate. So what would draw someone to go to graduate school to be a student in your class, and what advice do you give them, or like what advice do you give them before they even make that choice? Like if they're still debating whether or not they should go, what do you think would be a good kind of like way to tell them like if they're hesitant, what would just basically be like a good I don't know, like factor, like deciding factor for them to go or to stay or not go?
Yeah, I think that many times it's a way to elevate your career. So it could be someone perhaps in undergrad studied liberal arts or some field that was not business, and they want to get an MBA to learn all the different aspects of business. Sometimes people do have, they might have, regardless of their major, they're doing something in business, but they see jobs that they want that generally the screening is having an MBA. So they can really elevate themselves into a certain field that is really important to them, or they can elevate their compensation over time. When I went to Kellogg, I was in sales, and then I moved into brand management, and I was working with all MBAs, and I almost feel like I went to almost validate myself. But I learned so much about like how leadership thinks of the company, like how a company in different business models run. Um, there's also, a lot of people who are, want to be entrepreneurs, but they want to learn about how to run a business, how to get funding, and have a chance to try entrepreneurship while they're on campus. So, like a lot of people join other, classmates and start businesses. It's always really fun to see. Um, by the time somebody's graduating, sometimes they have run a bit. They've been CEO of a startup while they're here. So there's all different things that are about like what career you might want and what sort of trajectory you might want as well. So very, very individual, but I think you got to think about the trade. If you go full time, the trade-off of stepping out of working can be a great thing, but it also puts like a high importance on what you come out of graduation with. And then sometimes people go like I was working when I went through an executive MBA program in my 30s, um, now years ago. But sometimes people go at weekends and nights, and they take a class or two at a time, and it's a multiple year commitment. It might be 3 or 4 years to do it that way, but they're also growing on the job too. And I would say like when I teach both in the full-time program, so people who've left their jobs, and then evening weekend, so people who are working full-time. And what I love about teaching an evening weekend student is that they take something from the class and they apply it right away, or they are getting ready for a big conversation with their boss, and that's really fun to see them be able to implement things right away. It's really cool.
Yeah, that was my mom didn't go to graduate school, but she went to undergrad in her 30s. And the
Mhm.
reason she went to undergrad was because she couldn't become like she couldn't move up in her career until she had that, undergrad degree. And I remember when she was like I was like 6, like
Mhm.
5, like really young, like 5 or 6, and she was going to the evening and weekend classes while having a full-time job, while taking care of me and my siblings. And I think she got a lot of her good networking skills from doing undergrad while in her 30s, and
Yeah.
she was able to network a little bit.
Going back to school, like however you do it, it's a huge networking opportunity. That's I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's also another major bonus out of that. And then as an alum, you have that network. But how inspirational for your mom. You
Yeah,
could tell it has inspired you. Very
she
cool.
she was very influential in my life and the work that I do. So
Yeah.
she's amazing, even though we get in fights every now and then. Who doesn't? Yeah. Well, thank you. Those were all our questions. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, especially on a Friday. It's a sleepy Friday here on the East Coast for me and Emily, but we greatly appreciate your time, and we'll be sure to link the book and then any relevant links in the bottom in this description. All right, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you
nice.
so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.